Come join me on Nightmare True, where all the stories you are about to hear are true.
This following story is one of the most distressing cases of murder I've ever researched. Let's start right at the beginning. Richard Benjamin Speck was born into a religious devoted family, child number 7 in a family of 8 children. Tragedy befell Speck from an early age, as there were many instances in his life that may have contributed to his psychotic mental state, as he later went down a crime-littered, dark, violent path. His eldest brother died at the age of 23 in a car accident, and his father, who he was extremely close to, died when he was just 50. Specker lost 2 guiding figures in his life so early on. Just a few years after his father's death, his mother married Carl Lindbergh. He was very different from Richard Speck's father and would have a profound, detrimental effect on the psyche of Richard Speck. In fact, Carl Lindbergh had a criminal record spanning almost 3 decades. It would seem Speck's mother was after a bit of rough. Speck's stepfather, as he now was an alcoholic. This would have devastating consequences on Richard as a teenager. Lindbergh would often mentally abuse him and degrade him. He was forever bullying Richard. Speck began drinking at the age of just 13 and would be an alcoholic in his very early teens. Over a period of time, he was arrested for petty crime. Speck suffered at school and developed severe behavioral problems. He was gradually beginning to turn to the dark side. Speck, who married when he was 19, soon had a baby girl. He went off the rails a few years later. The fuse had been lit. He was a bomb waiting to explode. Over the next few years, he was arrested for all sorts, including drunken behavior, forgery, burglary, assault, and so on. It wasn't long before he wanted to try a bit of murder. Just a week after being paroled for a burglary arrest, he committed another more sinister crime. He followed a woman to the parking lot of the apartment block late at night. He went at her with a knife, but she screamed. Speck ran off, and the police who were nearby arrested him. He was charged with assault and sentenced to 16 months in prison. But he was accidentally released too early. During his time on the outside, he had a tattoo with the words, "Born to Raise Hell," on his left arm. This would be instrumental in his capture later on in life. It wasn't long before he was at it again. He stabbed a man in an altercation, but was only fined after a smart-ass lawyer convinced a judge to give him a suspended sentence. Speck was spiraling out control. He decided to commit a robbery. The police were after him once more. They may as well stuck a revolving door on the police station. Speck decided he wasn't sticking around and went on the run, hitting Scarper to Chicago faster than a greyhound with a hot potato in its mouth. It was in Chicago where he finally crossed the line and damned himself to hell. One night he broke into the home of 65-year-old Virgil Harris. He violently raped her and stole some belongings. She said he was rather polite. Her mind was broken. She could not identify him to the police, but the police found items belonging to the victim in his hotel room where he was staying. After police wanted to question him over the death of barmaid in another violent incident, Mary K. Pierce, who was beaten to death as she walked home, was last seen with Richard Speck. Richard Speck frequented the pub where she worked and was seen arguing with her on the night of her demise. Speck was one step ahead because he once again evaded the law and disappeared. Then came a terrifying night on July the 13th, 1966, a night straight out of a horror movie. South Chicago, Richard Speck knocked on the door of a communal townhouse that served as a home to 8 young nurses, all between the ages of 19 to 24. One of the nurses, Corazon Amuro, opened the door to be greeted by the sight of Speck armed with a gun and a knife. He bashed his way into the home. He gathered the terrified nurses together and told them to empty their purses. "This will soon be all over," he told them. But sadly, he was just getting started. He tied the women up using ripped-up bedsheets. He then took them to a room and one by one and tortured them and stabbed them and treated the victims like a mouse being toyed with by a cat. This horrendous act went on for 5 hours. It was in no way quick or merciful. Whilst this went on, the petrified Corazon Amuro rolled under a bed and hid. Speck continued to torture and murder the ladies and then left. Not realizing Corazon Amuro was under the bed. Corazon stayed under the bed for a very long time. She soon felt she had to emerge. Was Richard Speck going to be waiting for her? She wondered. She got up, and as she ran through the building to escape, she found bodies of her companions littered everywhere. She found Susan Ferris, aged just 21, with stab wounds to the chest and a mutilated face. She found Gloria Jean David, 22, and Mary Ann Jordan, 20, dead from similar wounds. Mary Ann Jordan had also been brutally stabbed in her left eye. Gloria Jean David was dead, naked with her throat slit wide open. Corazon Amuro continued through the house. She found more bodies in different rooms. Nina Schmale, 24, Valentina Pays, only 23, Merlita Gargullo, 23, all found dead by strangulation and stab wounds. The same, sadly, goes for Patricia Matusek, aged just 20, and Pamela Wilkening, also only 20 years old. Corazon Amuro ran, screaming from the house. The police were alerted, and the city went into shock. Richard Speck's description was released to the media. His distinctive "Born to Raise Hell" tattoo was going to be his downfall. Richard Speck was staying in a local flea pit hotel, no more than he deserved. He tried to commit suicide by slashing his wrist, but panicked and called for an ambulance. He was taken to hospital and saved. It was there that people took note of his tattoos and raised their alarm. Richard Speck was arrested at last. The evil beast was caught. Surely he would not escape again, would he? With an incredible amount of security, including machine gun wielding armed guards watching his every move. The trial of Richard Speck was held in Piana County, and it lasted 2 weeks. Speck was insistent that he had no memory of the murders and that he was innocent due to not being mentally aware. Insanity, if you will, or a coward pleading for his life. The extremely brave Corazon Amuro walked from the witness box over to Richard Speck, pointed at him and uttered the words,
"I'm telling the whole court. He was the evil, lying son of a bitch that murdered those innocent girls, and no doubt others too."
He was damned on April the 15th, 1967. He was found guilty and received the death penalty. But once more, he was to escape justice. In 1971, the court abolished the death penalty because jurors who were opposed to the death penalty were never placed on the jury. However, the sentence was changed to a 400-year sentence. Speck was involved in a lot of illegal activities during his prison term and proclaimed he did not care because he's serving life, so what can anyone do to punish him? A videotape was discovered by a news reporter in 1988, which was filmed in prison and shows a genetically altered Speck who now had breasts due to taking hormone tablets that were smuggled into prison. He was seen parading around in silk underwear and performing fellatio on his prison bitch, Ronell Honeybun Larimore. On the videotape, Richard Speck speaks about the night of the murder and uttered the chilling words,
"I always felt I had no feelings, if you're asking if I felt sorry. No."
And when he was asked by an off-screen person why he killed the women so brutally, he said with the utmost calm,
"It just wasn't their night."
Evil beyond words. Richard Speck died on December the 5th, 1991, of ill heart attack. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Nightmare Truth. Thank you, good night,